Boldwood presents High Spirits at the Village Inn, written by Sharon Booth and read by Karen Cass. The residents and guests of Rowan Vale. Living. Kirsty Harrison, lead buyer at Rochester's department store, Oxford Street, wife of Rory. Rory Harrison, Deputy Director of Software Development for a large education and research company, husband of Kirsty. Callie Chase, current owner of the Harling estate, including Rowan Vale, thanks to her ability to see all the ghosts, lives at Harling Hall. Imogen, Immy, Chase, Callie's daughter, who shares her ability to see all the ghosts. Sir Lawrence Laurie Davenport, former owner of the Harling estate, still lives at Harling Hall. Brodie Davenport, Laurie's grandson. He doesn't have his grandfather's ability to see the ghosts, which was why the estate was sold to Callie. Clara Milsom, housewife, mum, lives with her family at Honeywell House. Mia Williams, housekeeper, cook, admin assistant, and general Girl Friday at Harling Hall. Shona Bannerman, manageress of Mrs. Heron's Tea Shop, a vintage 1940s tea shop in the village. Max Meyer, Shona's other half, head of languages at Chipping Royston Academy and excellent amateur baker. Amelia Davis, vicar at All Souls Church. Barry and Jeannie Wilson, run Blighty's Bakery next to Mrs. Heron's tea shop. Mrs. Smithson, elderly lady who lives at Appleseed Cottage, blissfully unaware that she is sharing her home with two ghosts. Robin and Curtis, managers of the Magic Lantern, the village's vintage cinema. Penny Deering, manager of the Quicken Tree Inn. Ingrid, hairdresser at the 1960s salon. Lucy and Sam Clifton, managers of the 1960s record shop. Ernie Baldwin and Gordon Thwaite, elderly neighbours in the village who love a good moan. Jasper Edgecombe, photographer at the Victorian Photography Studio. Andy Greaves, bus conductress or Clippy on the vintage buses. Ghosts of Rowan Vale. Brooke and Danny, aged 25 and 29 respectively, they died in 2008 after attending a company party, unfortunately flamboyantly dressed as 1980s pop stars. They're still struggling with the shame of it. Aubrey Wyndham, former owner of the Harling estate, died 1870, aged 50. Still lives at Harling Hall, a true gentleman. Agnes Ashcroft, wife of another former owner of the Harling estate, died 1818, aged 45. Has since married Aubrey and lives with him and their adopted daughter Florence at Harling Hall. Florence, Florrie, 10-year-old wartime evacuee to Harling Hall, died 1941, adopted by Aubrey and Agnes. Polly Heron, died in 1948, aged 37, former manager of Mrs. Heron's tea shop when it was known as Deakin's, lives in the flat above the tea shop. Ray Deakin, Polly's younger brother, shares the flat with her. The two of them are Shona's great-aunt and uncle. Quintus Severus, a North African Roman soldier who died in the 2nd century, aged somewhere in his late 50s as far as he can remember. The oldest ghost on the estate, to anyone's knowledge, still takes his duties extremely seriously and keeps order on the estate. Percy Swain, affectionately nicknamed Perks by Callie, Percy died in 1905, aged 62. An Edwardian station porter, he still turns up for work every day. Silas Alexander. The Reverend Alexander, former vicar of All Souls, died in 1927, aged 75. He is horrified that the current vicar at his church is a woman and thoroughly disapproves of the tourist industry in the village. Walter Tasker. One of William Shakespeare's schoolmasters, Walter died in 1612, aged 71. He will tell anyone who'll listen that he taught Will everything he ever knew about writing and takes credit for many of the bard's most famous quotes. Peter the Baker. Known to the ghost children of the village as Pillory Pete, he died in 1790, aged 44, while fastened in the pillory when a rock was thrown at his head by his humiliated wife. Robert and John. Young brothers, aged 9 and 6, who died in 1790 after being run over by a horse and cart. Isaac Grace. Former landlord of the Quicken Tree from 1685, still considers himself to be in charge of the pub despite having died in 1698. Ronnie Smith and Bill Fairfax. World War I soldiers, aged 18 and 19. Died in 1915 when they fell off the station platform at Harling's Holt fighting over a girl called Lily. Harmony Hill. A famous Hollywood actress who died in 1946, aged 30, while in the area filming. Lives at Appleseed Cottage, unbeknownst to its official tenant, Mrs. Smithson. Millie Lane. Died in 1964, aged 17. A former waitress at Mrs. Heron's tea shop, she is still obsessed with the Beatles, and Paul McCartney in particular. Lives with her niece, Lucy, and Lucy's husband, Sam, at the flat above the record shop. Chapter 1. Pushing open the front door, I felt a warm satisfaction as I stepped into my hallway and flicked on the light switch. There was no post on the doormat, not even any junk mail for once. After kicking off my shoes, I hurried into the living room and switched on the lamp, then drew the curtains. It was good to be home after a hectic day at work. I loved my job as lead buyer at Rochester's department store in Oxford Street, but the long days and the commute home to Boreham Wood did take their toll, particularly in the winter months. Thankfully, the central heating was on a timer, so the house was nice and toasty. It might be the end of March, but the month showed no signs of going out like a lamb, as the saying goes. It was cold, dark, and miserable, and it had rained most of the day too. I switched on another lamp, then reached for the remote control, which operated the flame effect on our electric fire. I didn't need the heater. The radiators were doing a more than adequate job of warming the house up, but the glow from the dancing flames made me feel instantly cozier. Remembering I'd left my shoes lying on the doormat, I hurried back into the hallway and put them neatly on the shoe rack, then hung up my coat and bag. Glancing at my watch, I guessed I had about half an hour before Rory arrived home. It was Thursday night, takeaway night. No need to cook or worry about what we were going to eat. Time for a quick shower to wash off the stresses of the day. I was just towel drying my hair when I heard the front door shut. I wrapped the towel around my head and headed onto the landing. "Just had a shower, I'll be with you in a minute," I called down the stairs. Rory, who was hanging up his coat, looked up and smiled. "Pyjama time." "How did you guess?" "I'm a genius." "Coffee?" "Please, and dig out the takeaway menus. They're in the—" "Second drawer down. I know, you tell me every week." He disappeared into the kitchen, and I hurried back into the bedroom and finished drying my hair. Then I ran a comb through it and shrugged on a clean pair of pyjamas and my slippers. "Wow, Kirsty," I said, glancing at myself in the mirror. "What a vision your husband has come home to this evening." But even though it was now the end of March, it still felt like midwinter in my mind. It was dark, and I'd had a long day. On the days he worked from home, Rory would see me arriving back from Rochester's, dressed in my smart work clothes and in full makeup. On warm evenings, I'd change into a summer dress, and we'd go outside to enjoy a glass of wine in the garden while dinner cooked. But at this time of year, I'd have happily hibernated. I was definitely not a winter person. Rory had made coffee when I arrived downstairs. He looked tired, though still impossibly handsome. "Long day?" I asked sympathetically. "As always. How was your day?" "Busy, but good." We had the same conversation most days, I thought suddenly. We could have been following a script. It worried me a bit. "Did you find the menus?" I asked, reaching for my coffee cup. He picked up some leaflets and waved them at me. "Chinese, Indian, Thai or pizza?" I considered the matter. "Mexican," I said at last. He rolled his eyes. "You're so awkward. I'll have to go on the app then." Grumbling, he discarded the leaflets and picked up his phone, studying it for a moment before tapping the screen a few times. "As if I don't faff around with screens enough," he muttered. "Sorry," I said, hiding a smile. Thursday nights were supposed to be our phone-free nights, but the image of burritos was in my mind now, and our favourite Mexican place did things the modern way. "Only for you," he told me with a sigh. "Hey, put that phone down." "Oops, sorry." Guiltily, I dropped my mobile onto my lap. I had had a message from my friend Dawn reminding me that we were meeting for lunch on Saturday. Another trek into the city. I could only hope the weather had improved by then. "I should think so too," he said. Scrolling down, he added casually, "Have you heard back yet?" "Huh?" I'd found the remote for the television and was searching for something worth watching. "I'm guessing you want the extra spicy burrito meal?" "Yes, please, with beef and black beans. Make it a large one." Rory raised an eyebrow, and I shrugged defensively. "I didn't have time for lunch." He gave me a knowing look and tapped the screen again. "Well?" he asked. "Have you?" "Have I what?" "Heard back," he said patiently. "About the holiday." "Oh, that," I nodded. "Yes, it's fine, although they did say I should try to give more notice next time. I pointed out that it wasn't my idea and that my husband had, for some reason known only to himself, decided we should both take a week off work, even though we're not going away, and it all seems a bit pointless to me, but—" "It's our wedding anniversary." His voice was flat, and he didn't look at me. My stomach lurched, and I swallowed. "Oh," I said, "yes, I know. I mean, of course I know that, but we're not going away, and we don't really do anything special, do we?" I'd forgotten, and he knew it. I could have kicked myself. 10 years, he said. He put down the phone and smiled at me. "Ordered. Should be here in about 30 to 40 minutes. So you didn't forget then?" "Of course not. 10 years. April the 11th. The big day. How could I possibly forget that?" Had it really been 10 years? But that meant... I swallowed again and cradled my coffee cup as if for comfort. "Well, that's quite a thing, isn't it? What is the 10th anniversary anyway?" "Tin," he replied. "How on earth did you know that?" I shook my head. Sometimes he amazed me. Most of the time he amazed me. Most of the time it amazed me that he was amazed by me. The fact he'd stuck with me for 10 years amazed me most of all. "So it's definite then? You've got that week off?" I nodded, wondering why it was so important to him. "Yes, like I said, I break off on Good Friday and I go back to work on Monday the 13th of April. "Great." He leaned back in his armchair and sipped his coffee. "What's the big deal, though?" I asked, suspiciously. "Yes, I know it's our anniversary, our 10th anniversary, but we could still go out to celebrate without us taking a week off work. It's on a Saturday this year, after all. Why do we need time off?" "Don't you think it's about time we took a break? We've worked solidly since Christmas, and I can't remember the last time we went anywhere or did anything different. I thought it would be good to spend some time together, that's all." Rory leaned forward, an eager look in his dark eyes. "Maybe if the weather improves, we could have a run out to the coast or into the countryside one day. A change of scene and some fresh air would do us good." I eyed him worriedly. He'd sounded casual when he said that, but he'd mentioned a couple of times recently about how good it would be to live by the sea or deep in the countryside, and how working in London was all very well when you were younger, but when you got to our age, maybe it was time to think again. Had he been serious? I'd laughed it off at the time, told him we weren't in our dotage yet, thanks very much, but maybe he'd meant it. Was that the reason he wanted me to take a week off work? Did he want to go property viewing? If so, he was being very sneaky about it. The thought gave me chills. I'd been here before, and I didn't think I could face it again. The first time he tentatively mentioned the subject, I'd distracted him with something else. The second time, I'd tried to laugh it off, even though I didn't feel remotely amused. "I'm only 44, I'd told him. "Just because you're an old man doesn't mean we're ready to retire just yet." "I'm not 50 until the end of the year, thank you very much," he'd retorted indignantly. "You'll be 45 in the summer. You're catching up." "Catching up, but not giving up. Why would we want to move away from here? We've got this lovely house." "It's a 3-bedroomed terraced house, Kirsty," he'd pointed out. "It's hardly Windsor Castle." "But it's home, and the commute to Oxford Circus is very manageable for me, and you only have to go into the office 1 day a week most weeks, so it's not like it's a problem for you." "I know that, it's just—" Rory had sighed and shrugged. "I was just saying, that's all, forget it." And I had, or at least I'd tried to, but it had kept nagging away at me because I'd had that conversation before, and look where that had led me. And now, here he was, sneaking the subject of rural life into the conversation again. What if that was the real reason he'd wanted me to take a week off work? What if he did harbour hopes of moving away from here? What if he had a whole host of viewings lined up in some godforsaken place in the middle of nowhere? Lincolnshire even, which seemed like 1,000,000 miles away to me, but was where he'd grown up and where his mum and dad still lived. What the hell would I do then? Chapter 2. Brooke. "I'm telling you now, if she's planning some ridiculous spring ball or something, I'll tell her where to shove it." Ernie Baldwin nodded smugly at his fellow cynic, Gordon Thwaite. They were never happier than when attending these meetings at the Magic Lantern, Rowan Vale's vintage cinema, and doing their best to put the village's owner, Callie, in her place. "Don't they ever shut up moaning?" Brooke muttered crossly, as she craned her neck to shoot the oblivious residents a filthy look. "At least Callie does things for us. At least she gives us something to look forward to. Not that they'd care, of course, being alive and everything." She nudged Danny, who was slouched in the chair beside her. "Selfish, right?" Danny shrugged. "Suppose so." Behind them they heard a giggle, and Polly Heron's voice came to them. "I reckon she's planning a proper May Day celebration. Maybe there'll be a maypole and them dancers with the jingle bells strapped to their knees." Brooke twisted round in her seat and groaned. "Morris dancers? I hope you're wrong about that, Polly." "Well, whatever it is, I think we're about to find out," said Ray, Polly's younger brother. He nodded, and they all turned to face the front, where Callie had just walked on stage, accompanied by her boyfriend, Brodie. They were hand in hand, as usual, and looked sickeningly happy. Brooke sighed and glanced at Danny. Even in that ridiculous makeup and the stupid costume, he was gorgeous. Besides, she'd got used to the adamant look now. It wasn't his fault, was it? It had been her idea for him to go to the party dressed like that. She'd thought he'd looked dashing, with his dark curls and fabulous bone structure. How was she supposed to know they'd never come home again, and he'd be stuck dressed that way for all eternity? After all, if she'd had an inkling, she'd never have gone to the event dressed like one of the girls from Bananarama now, would she? She ran a hand through her straw-like hair, which had been sprayed to within an inch of its life as she'd got ready for the fancy dress party that fateful night. Trust her to have to spend her entire afterlife in this get-up. And to think, she'd nearly chosen to go as a 1980s Madonna. She'd have looked so much sexier if she had. Maybe Danny would have noticed her if she'd been wearing fingerless lace gloves, fishnet stockings and a rah-rah skirt, instead of a t-shirt, high-waisted trousers, red braces and chunky Doc Martin boots with hair that wouldn't look out of place on Wurzel Gummidge. "Thanks so much for coming," Callie said. "Just a few things I wanted to run past you all. Firstly, after listening to and reading all your suggestions as to what to do with the proceeds from the Christmas market and Dickensian weekend, the funds have now been assigned. We're going to use some of the money to make improvements to the village library, which is in dire need of an upgrade. We're also going to install some computers there for the use of all villagers who need access to the internet and don't have their own computer." "Like we'd know what to do with a computer," Gordon said. And we intend to start a computer club for those of you who don't know how to use them, Callie continued. In this day and age, having access to the internet can be so useful, and we don't want our, longer-term residents to miss out on anything by not having that. We also thought it would be fun to have a get-together every week, or even twice a week, where people can have a catch-up and a chat. To that end, as well as the computer club, we're going to start a book club, and everyone will be welcome. Now, obviously, you ghosts can chat about books too, but the problem is that most people won't be able to hear your opinions, so we'll have a discussion later about whether you'd like your own separate book club. We'll be stocking up on audiobooks, so reading won't be a problem. The library is such a lovely old building, and we really want to make more use of it.
She could have put all this in that flaming newsletter of hers,
Ernie Baldwin grumbled, as Callie continued to share various news, such as the plans for weekly summer tea dances in the ballroom at Harling Hall and the forthcoming opening of the model village.
Wasting our time like this. Didn't have to come, did you?
Percy Swain snapped. Naturally, Ernie Baldwin carried on moaning to Gordon Thwaite. Neither of them had a clue that the ghost of the old station porter was sitting right next to them, clearly very indignant on Callie's behalf.
Too nosy to stay at home, Ray said, rolling his eyes. Rather stay here and heckle.
Like those two old blokes from the Muppets, Brooke agreed, receiving a blank look in return from Ray, who'd died on New Year's Day 1948 and had no clue who the Muppets were. Finally, there's one more thing I'd like to tell you all, Callie said. She smiled at Brodie, who squeezed her hand and nodded as he smiled back. A couple of nights ago, Brodie asked me to marry him, and I said yes. There were loud cheers from the audience as both ghostly and living residents showed their delight at the news. Oh, Callie, that's brilliant! Polly and Ray's great-niece Shona, who ran Mrs. Heron's tea shop in the village, jumped to her feet and clapped loudly. Congratulations to you both. Max and I will make the wedding cake. Callie laughed. I was hoping you'd say that, she admitted. Both Shona and her partner Max were excellent bakers. Brooke felt a pang of disappointment as she realised that whatever concoction the two of them created for the happy couple, she'd never get to taste it. When's the big day, then? How's Immy taking it? Are you getting married at All Souls? Brodie held up his hands as the couple were suddenly bombarded with questions, and he'd only heard the ones from the living. He couldn't hear the ones from the ghosts because poor Brodie didn't have the gift. As grandson of Sir Lawrence Davenport, the former owner of the Harling estate, which included Rowan Vale, it had been hoped that Brodie would inherit Laurie's ability to see and hear the ghosts of the village. Unfortunately, Brodie had become the second generation in a row not to possess the ability, which had forced Laurie to sell the entire estate to someone who did. A chance meeting with single mother Callie had been the answer to everyone's prayers, because Callie did have the gift, and after some gentle persuasion, she'd bought the estate from Laurie for £10, as tradition dictated. After a bit of a dodgy start, Callie and Brodie had fallen in love, and now they ran the estate together. Some of the older living residents weren't so sure about a woman owning the place, as it had never been known before in all the centuries that the Harling estate had existed, but most people liked and admired her. The ghosts, meanwhile, had quickly realised that she had the best of intentions and wanted to make their afterlives more interesting and fulfilling, so they already felt a deep loyalty to her. And Brodie? Well, he couldn't see them or hear them, but they all knew he was concerned for their welfare, just as his grandfather was, and that he did all he could to help Callie to help them. Brodie was tall and dark with piercing blue eyes, and Brooke always felt a flutter of pleasure when she saw him. He was almost as good-looking as Danny, and a lot more cheerful, it had to be said.
We haven't set a date yet, he told them all. It will probably be next year. So why the big fuss now, then? Grumbled Gordon Thwaite.
Percy nudged him furiously, though it was a waste of time, as Gordon couldn't feel a thing. Brooke suspected it made Percy feel a bit better, though. Immy's really happy, Callie added, especially since we've promised she can be a bridesmaid, along with Florrie, of course. Immy, who was Callie's 11-year-old daughter and possessed the gift just like her mother, was good friends with a little evacuee girl called Florence who'd died aged 10 while staying at Harling Hall during the Second World War.
We haven't really thought about where we'll get married yet,
Brodie said to answer the final question. He glanced at Callie.
But I suspect All Souls will be high on the list.
What we wanted to add, Callie explained, is that we're planning to have an engagement party to celebrate, and we'd like to invite you all.
We've spoken to Penny this morning, Brodie added, and after a bit of debate, we've decided to have the party at the Quicken Tree. It's more central for everyone, and the function room is fairly big. And, he admitted, it will be nice for us to get away from Harling Hall for a bit. We're very lucky to live and work there, but a change of scene will make it feel more special for us. We hope you'll be able to join us.
When is it? Asked Ingrid, who worked at the swinging 60s hair salon.
Saturday, the 11th of April,
Brodie said. Just over 2 weeks? Polly whistled. Not long, is it?
Your social diary full, is it?
Her brother asked, grinning. Polly nudged him in the ribs. Watch it, cheeky. Shona called, I'll make your engagement cake. There was a cry of dismay from Barry and Jeanie Wilson, who together ran Blighty's bakery next door to Mrs. Heron's tea shop. Not fair, protested Jeanie. You've already bagged the wedding cake. Well, Callie said awkwardly, I suppose...
We're going to need a lot of food for the engagement party, Brodie said quickly. Sandwiches, pastries, savoury snacks. It would be marvellous if Blighty's could supply those.
Barry nodded.
Come and see as soon as you're ready. We'll talk terms.
I won't charge you for the cake, Shona said primly. It's a gift from us to you. The Wilsons scowled, and Shona gave them a sweet smile and sat back down.
Right, Brodie said. I think that's everything. Formal invitations will be posted through every letterbox on the estate, and we hope to see as many of you at the Quicken Tree as possible. Thank you all for coming. Now, we'd better get out of here before tonight's showing of The Wicked Lady begins. Unless you're staying to watch it, of course.
There was a lot of chatter as those who weren't staying for the film filed out of the cinema into the cool air of a late March evening that was already quite dark. Clocks go forward on Sunday, Brooke remarked, to no one in particular. An hour less in bed. Danny frowned.
Why do you remember things like that? What difference does it make to us? It's not as if we have to be up for work or anything like that, is it?
Brooke bit her lip, refusing to take the bait. She knew Danny had enjoyed his work in the IT department of a big pharmaceutical company back in the day, and that he still missed the buzz of getting ready for work each morning, heading into town to mix with his colleagues and do all the things a young man of 29 should be doing. Whereas she had to admit she'd never particularly liked her job as a receptionist at the same company and had only stayed because she got to see Danny every day. Well, there was no point in going over all that again. She got to see Danny every day now, and look how that was working out for them. She might as well have gone on to wherever it was most of the dead went to, rather than linger here with someone who didn't even seem to notice her most of the time. It was just like being alive again in that respect. She looked down as an arm slipped through hers and Polly beamed at her. A party, she said cheerfully. Just what we need. Do you think they'll play the Andrews Sisters? I love a bit of boogie-woogie bugle boy. Who knows, maybe you can request a song, Brooke suggested, smiling. She really didn't care what music they played, as long as it wasn't bloody Bananarama. Chapter 3. I don't really see the problem, Dawn said, digging a fork into her macaroni cheese with extra pulled pork. And I should hope that you'd at least listen to Rory and find out why he's suddenly so keen to leave Boreham Wood. Or maybe I'm being naive. We were sitting in the little cafe we'd frequented for years, eating pasta and drinking wine, and mulling over my sudden and unexpected fear that I was about to be uprooted from my nice, cosy little life and transported to who knows where. But Rory likes Boreham Wood as much as I do, I mused. It's got everything we need, and I love our little house. I wonder if it's travelling into central London that's getting to him, although it's only once a week, so I don't see why. I do, Dawn said with a shudder. I don't know how you stand it, to be honest. Trekking off to Oxford Street every day, facing a train journey, then the bus, all the hustle and bustle, the noise, the traffic, the fumes, then doing it all over again on the way back home, day in, day out. Ugh. She glanced out of the window at the stream of cars and vans going by and shook her head. Horrible. But you love London, I protested. It was you who wanted us to meet up here today. I love visiting London, she corrected me. It's great to come here 3 or 4 times a year, get my fix, then go home to my lovely house and breathe the fresh air again. I couldn't stand living here. You didn't always think like that, I muttered. Back in the day, Dawn and I had shared a flat in Barking with another girl, which frankly had been a bit of a dump. It hadn't really mattered though, as we were hardly ever in. Life back then had been about socialising and building our careers. Fresh out of university and eager to make our mark on the world, London life had seemed so exciting with endless possibilities. Even after we'd gone our separate ways, Dawn and I stayed in London, she in Southwark and I in Camden. But when Dawn got pregnant, she and her husband had a change of heart. I'm 33 now, she'd pointed out. London's great when you're in your 20s, but I don't want to raise a family in a city. We're moving back to Surrey to be closer to my family. Don't worry, I'll still be able to visit regularly. Our coffee shop chats won't stop. But naturally, they'd grown fewer and further apart as Dawn and her husband concentrated on raising their 2 children and building a new life in the small town in which they'd settled. By then I'd moved to Boreham Wood, to the house I still lived in, and I thought Dawn was crazy to move out to the sticks. I'd married Rory the year after she left London, and he'd moved in with me straight after the wedding. We'd agreed we didn't want children, and London life suited us. Rory had a great job working as Deputy Director of Software Development for a company within the education and research sector. If anyone had asked me what that meant, I wouldn't have had a clue how to explain it. It was way too technical for me. All I knew was he mostly worked from home but had a lot of responsibility and earned a shed load of money, more than I did anyway. Although now I was lead buyer at Rochester's, my income had gone up substantially too. I'd come a long way from those flat-sharing days in Barking. I think you should at least hear him out instead of closing down the subject every time he brings it up, Dawn said, clearly trying to sound neutral, although it was obvious to me whose side she was on. What harm could it do to listen to his point of view? I've been here before, remember? I pushed away my plate, suddenly not hungry. My first marriage? He went exactly the same way. Suddenly London lost its shine. He wanted to move to the country. I didn't think much of the idea back then either. But you were much younger in those days, Dawn reminded me gently. Much younger. There's a world of difference between someone in their mid-20s and someone in their mid-40s, yet here I was, still digging my heels in and refusing to consider the possibilities just as I had then. I thought about Rory and realised, with a pang, how tired he looked recently. There were far more lines around his eyes and a permanent crease in his forehead from the frown he seemed to wear a lot, and his dark hair was peppered with grey now. Was I being unfair? Not even considering the possibility of giving him something he clearly wanted. He'd been so good to me, so patient. He deserved better, surely. And was moving away from London and starting again really such a terrible idea? We could sell our house for a good price and move somewhere cheaper. We'd probably get a bigger garden, and it would be nice to have a view of something other than more houses. But what about my job? It was all right for Rory. He only had to commute once a week, and if he wanted to move further away from London, his company had other hubs scattered around the country. Birmingham, Bristol, Leeds, Glasgow. He could, theoretically, move to within commuting distance of any of those cities. I, on the other hand. But Rochester's had other stores. At some point there might be a vacancy in any one of those. Shouldn't I at least consider it? Maybe put out some feelers? I should go along with whatever Rory wanted for his sake. My stomach lurched, and I took a sip of wine, desperate to bury the feelings that this train of thought was stirring up. Once, many years ago, I'd gone along with what my first husband had wanted, or I'd pretended to. He'd had a dream to leave city life behind and find rural bliss with me in some pretty little cottage where we could raise our children and be a proper family. And I'd said, of course, that was what I wanted too, and I'd really tried to convince myself that it was, that I could be happy living that sort of life with the man I loved. Except, deep down, I'd known I couldn't be, and I'd spiraled into a panic that had led me to do stupid things that I would regret for the rest of my life. I had to be sure this time. I couldn't just go along with Rory's dreams and make the same mistakes over again. If he really wanted us to start a new life somewhere else, then I had to be absolutely sure it was what I wanted too. Okay, so my thoughts were spiraling again. I had to rein them in, or I'd go to the same dark place I had before. After all, Rory hadn't actually said he was planning to start house hunting, had he? But if he was, then maybe Rory wasn't the right man for me after all, and maybe, just maybe, I'd married him for all the wrong reasons. Chapter 4. Brooke. Knock, knock. Brooke and Danny glanced at each other in surprise. It was rare that they got ghostly visitors to the flat Rory had assigned them when they first arrived in Rowan Vale, but there was no doubting that this was one. Living visitors, such as the girls from the hairdressing salon beneath, or Callie or Rory, would knock properly on the door. Since ghosts couldn't knock on wood, they always verbalised the sound, as it was understood that they were entitled to their privacy and simply walking into another ghost's property was considered very bad form. "Who is it?" Danny asked suspiciously, as Brooke called, "Come in." He gave her a scowl, which she shrugged off. Too late now, whoever it was. She was relieved when Polly Heron stepped through the door, a wide smile on her face. Even Danny couldn't object to Polly, who was one of the kindest, loveliest ghosts in the village. "What brings you here?" she asked in surprise, after greeting their guest. "Sorry to intrude, my loves," Polly said. "I have some news I thought you'd want to know." She smoothed her cotton print dress and sat down gracefully in the armchair. "Isn't it awful weather?" she mused, gazing out of the window at the heavy grey sky. "You'd never think it'll be April in 2 days, would you? Our Shona's constantly mopping the floor of the tea shop because people keep trailing the wet in. All them puddles they're walking through, and all them dripping umbrellas and raincoats. Proper messy it is in there. She's right fed up." She patted her dark hair, which was neatly swept into the Victory Rolls style of the 1940s. "I'll say one thing for being a ghost. You never have to worry about ruining your hair in the rain, do you?" She laughed. Brooke, thinking of the terrible hairstyle she'd been stuck with for the past 18 years, couldn't help wishing the rain would wash all the hairspray out of it and give her flat hair again. She'd happily stand out in the rain for hours if she thought it would make any difference. Sadly, it wouldn't. She'd already tried it. "So you were saying you had some news?" Danny said, clearly thinking that Polly had wandered off the subject and wanting to bring her back on course, no doubt so she could say what she had to say and leave as soon as possible. Brooke sighed. It was nice to have company, and she wished Danny would be a bit more welcoming. Polly gave him a knowing smile. "So I was, and yes, I do. Well, what it is, you see, is that some of us ghosts want to give Callie and Brodie an engagement present, so we're canvassing everyone for suggestions of what we can give them." She chuckled. "Bearing in mind we can't actually touch anything, have no money, and Brodie can't see or hear us, which does narrow things down a bit." You could say that," Brooke agreed. "Are the living residents getting them something, do you know?" "Lots of things," Polly said with a sigh. "Obviously our Shona and Max are making them a cake, and Jasper Edgecombe has offered to do them an engagement portrait at his photographic studio. The girls at the salon are giving Callie a free hairdo and manicure and all that malarkey for her party, and—" "Yes, okay," Danny said. "We get it, but I don't see what we're supposed to do. It's not like we have a lot of options, is it?" "Not many at all," Polly said. "That's why we're asking everyone to put on their thinking caps. Walter's already offered to write them a poem, and we can't inflict that on the poor sods, can we? We need to find something better than that, or Callie and Brodie will never forgive us." She laughed again, and Brooke laughed too, imagining poor Callie having to sit through verse after verse of Walter's dreadful literary efforts. "Maybe we could arrange a screening of a romantic film for Callie and Brodie at the Magic Lantern," Danny suggested. "You could mention it to Shona, and she could ask Robin and Curtis to give them their own private showing." "I could," Polly said doubtfully, "but then that would really be a present from Robin and Curtis, wouldn't it? They're the managers of the cinema, after all. It wouldn't really be a present from us at all." The three of them sighed heavily, aware that this was going to be a lot trickier than even they'd realised. "Maybe they won't expect anything from us anyway," Danny said. "Oh, I'm sure they won't," Polly agreed. "But that's not the point, is it? We want to give them a present. They've both been so good to us, always thinking of us and including us in everything they can. And they deserve something nice, don't they?" "I suppose." Danny didn't sound too convinced, which made Brooke cross. "You're always so negative. Polly's right. They do. Love should be celebrated, shouldn't it, Pol?" "Definitely. And those two are perfect for each other. Don't you remember how lost and sad Brodie used to be before Callie arrived in the village? Practically worked himself to death trying to prove that he had a purpose, even though he couldn't see us ghosts. Bless him. He felt like such a failure because he didn't have his granddad's gift. It was Callie who turned that around and made him see his own worth, wasn't it? She made him feel needed and valuable in his own right. He's been so much happier since." "And didn't Callie have a bad time too?" Brooke asked. "I happened to hear Shona and Clara talking once about Callie's ex. You know, Immy's dad, and—" "You happened to hear that, did you?" Danny said suspiciously. "These things happen," Brooke said with indignation. "Not my fault if they can't see me, is it? I can't avoid everyone." "Quite right, love," Polly said with feeling. Since everyone knew that Polly liked to hang around the tea shop where she'd once been manager and eavesdrop on the customers' conversations, it was no wonder she agreed with Brooke on this one. Brooke gave Danny a smug grin. "Callie's ex was horrible, and from what I've heard," Polly added, nodding her head furiously, "her life before she even met him was blooming awful too. Her mum died when she was little, and her dad didn't want her. And she was passed from pillar to post, bless her cotton socks. I don't think she felt really loved and secure till she met Brodie. And being a single mum with no family backup all them years must have been so hard. Now she and Immy have someone they can rely on at last. Someone who'll always put them first." She gave a heartfelt sigh. "I think it's lovely. They saved each other. I do love a good love story, don't you?" Danny got up and walked out of the room. Polly looked at Brooke in surprise. "Something I said?" Brooke wrapped her arms around herself, that familiar sinking feeling in the pit of her stomach. "Just Danny being Danny." Not the most cheerful soul in the world, is he?" Polly agreed. "Bar the shouting and ranting, I'd say he's as miserable as Silas Alexander, in his own way." Since Silas Alexander, or the Reverend Silas Alexander, to give him his full title, was a grouchy old man who seemed to loathe the world and everyone in it, Brooke didn't feel that was very fair. "He wasn't always like this," Brooke protested. "He used to be such fun. He was so happy and outgoing. He's changed." "Life can do that to a person," Polly agreed. "Not life," Brooke said sadly. "Afterlife. He wants to go back to his old home and have things just the way they used to be, and that can never happen. I try so hard to make him smile, but it feels like he's been depressed ever since the accident. I don't know what I can do to bring back the old Danny again. I'd give anything to have him the way he was then. Anything." Polly reached out and took Brooke's hand. "Does he have any inkling how you feel about him?" Brooke gave her a startled look. What do you mean?" "Well, that you love him, because you do, don't you? You're head over heels for the lad. You'd have to be, the way you put up with him, because I've never seen him even smile at you, or give you a hug or anything. Yet you still stick to his side like glue." And don't think I haven't seen the longing glances you give him when he's looking the other way. Bless you, you've got it bad.
Brooke opened her mouth to protest, but no words came out.
How long have you been in love with Danny boy, then? Polly asked gently. Was it before or after the accident? I'm not.
Brooke sighed and shrugged, realising there was no fooling Polly.
Before. Long before. I met Danny when I was 14 and he was 18. My cousin introduced us. He was her new boyfriend. Thing is, I was smitten with him from that moment. I hoped one day when I was all grown up, he'd notice me. But he never did. He only had eyes for my cousin, you see. He felt about her the way I felt about him. I only took the job at his company so I'd get to see him every day. I kept thinking, one day he'll look at me and he'll forget all about her. Your cousin? Polly shook her head. That's not very nice, lovey, now, is it? You shouldn't have been trying to break them up. It's not decent. I didn't exactly try, Brooke said defensively. I just hoped and dreamed that one day he'd fall out of love with her and in love with me. I didn't do anything to make it happen.
Well, apart from taking the job at the IT company where he worked and getting made up to the nines every day, hoping he'd think how attractive she was, and laughing at all his jokes, and bringing him coffee and a pastry every morning, and giving him meaningful looks, and batting her eyelashes at him, and
even so, Polly said, it doesn't seem like a nice thing to do.
Brooke scowled.
Don't waste your sympathy on my cousin Polly. She made Danny unhappy. He's just forgotten all that.
She gazed out of the window at the pouring rain, her thoughts drifting back to all those days watching and waiting for Danny to notice that his perfect relationship wasn't as perfect as he thought it was.
She didn't deserve him. I just wish he knew that. You should tell him, Polly said. Not about your cousin, about you, about how you feel.
Brooke gave a bitter laugh.
There'd be no point. We've been stuck here for 18 years now, Poll, and in all that time, he's never so much as looked at me with any kind of interest whatsoever. I'm just some kid to him, even though I'm 25 now. That's all I ever was, and that's all I'll ever be. Then you have to make him see you differently, Polly said, squeezing her hand. 18 years you've waited for him to notice you? Well, it hasn't worked, has it? Time to change tactics, don't you think? Time to make him notice you.